In this video, we are going to show the APIC EM installation. The installation that I'm going to do is basically on a VMware ESX machine. I have the ISO file already downloaded for APIC EM. This installation can also be done on a bare metal, but in this video, I'm going to show it on a VMware hypervisor. So this is my VMware hypervisor. I'm going to quickly create a new virtual machine. Just a typical virtual machine. I'll call it APIC EM 1. I'll just give them. You just need to mention this as Linux. You can leave it at Red Hat Linux 7 with 64 bits. You need to have at least one network connected to the APIC EM and ensure that the adapter is VMX Net 3. You have different options, but choose VMX Net 3 and then use it to the proper network that you've actually configured already in your vSphere client. This is one of the important things. Is basically you need to have at least a minimum of 500 GB hard disk, and it's better to have it configured as thick provision. So it's all complete. I'm not going to power it on, but I'm going to basically edit the virtual machine settings once it is done. So one of the important things that we need to do is about the memory and the CPUs. So APIC EM actually requires about 64 GB of memory. 32 GB of memory is okay when you're running it in cluster. The new 1.2 version does run on 16 GB, but I'm going to use the 64 GB version. The 16 GB version just supports 20 devices and can be used for all demos and stuff. The number of CPUs, it's basically the virtual CPUs. It also needs to be around 6. So I'm going to just change this to 6. And rest all is all fine. We don't need the floppy, so you can just go ahead and remove it. In the CD, I'm going to just I've just already copied this APIC EM into the data store of this ESXi. So I'm just going to point it to the data store APIC EM 1.2, and I'm going to say connected at power on, and that's it from a perspective. So you just go ahead and power on, and just quickly see. You will see that the APIC EM starts getting installed. So installation is pretty straightforward. You just need to basically go and feed in certain information. So I'm just going to pause this video and return once the installation is done. So the installation begins, and APIC EM actually installs the Ubuntu VM over which the APIC EM runs as an application. So once the Ubuntu is installed, you are actually presented with this screen. This is where we actually configure the APIC EM settings in terms of what's the IP addresses and stuff. And I'm going to quickly show that to you. So once you see this, you just go and basically say yes. It checks the disk throughput. It throws up an error if there is a disk throughput error. So the thing is, if this is the first installation, you need to use it as a create a new APIC EM cluster. So it's gonna, if it's part of a cluster, then you actually add this to an existing cluster. So since this is the first APIC EM in the cluster, so I'm just gonna say create a new APIC EM cluster, and I'll basically be presented with an IP addressing option. So I'm just going to put this as 1.1.84. This is the IP address that needs to be used, and this will be used to basically connect to the APIC EM. The virtual IP is used when you have more than one APIC EM cluster, so that would be used as a virtual IP. So in this video, we have only one APIC EM. I'm just not going to use the virtual IP at all. So it is actually an optional parameter. So the net mask is straightforward. The default gateway is .1. So you can have your DNS servers, and you can also include some static routes. If you have multiple Ethernet NICs, you need to ensure that the static routes are there so that APIC EM can go and basically look at the devices. So in this video, we don't have anything, so it's going to use the standard default gateway that is configured. I'll use next. What it does basically, it's just validating whether it's able to ping the default gateway here, and once it's done, it's going to throw up me another configuration option. Second is HTTP proxy. It's important to actually have an HTTP proxy, but if you're just doing a demo, you can actually skip this step. HTTP proxy is basically if APIC EM can be actually accessed over internet, it can actually use those HTTP proxy that's mentioned here. So in this video, I'm just going to skip this. So you cannot skip it directly. So you just say next, and then it basically prompts you whether you want to skip this step or not. So now it prompts me that it can skip. I'll just skip this. CCO username, again you need to use the CCO username so that it can send out telemetry information to Cisco. So for this video I'm just going to use this. This is the Linux password. So this is basically the base Ubuntu Linux password. So you can configure any password that you like, or you can actually even generate those passwords. It's better to actually give your own password so that you remember it. And this is the password that will be used to basically log into the APIC EM once it's installed. It's basically the GUI password. Again, you have an option to generate the password, but it's always better to actually mention the password by yourself. NTP server, this is very prime important step. The APIC EM needs to have reachability to the NTP server, from where it can actually get the timing information. If the NTP server is not reachable, the installation does not proceed. So ensure that you have an NTP server up and running. It just validates the connection with the NTP server, and once the connection is successful, it just goes to the next step. So this for I just leave it at no. This is for if you have multiple hosts in the cluster, so it can either use encryption between for the communications between those hosts, or you can disable the encryption. So we have only one host, so I'm just going to leave it at no and say next. Harvest all virtual. This is basically I'm just going to leave it at default. It's better to leave it at default when it's the first time installation. And after this, it's just it's going to prompt you that it's going to go ahead and install the application. So I'm just going to say proceed. Now the APIC EM is actually now installing. So this actually takes a bit of time, around 10 to 15 minutes. So I'm just again going to pause the video and return once it's fully installed. So there's nothing else that needs to be entered into the system now. So we just need to wait till the APIC EM's application is installed on the Ubuntu virtual machine, and then it actually prompts you with a IP address and a URL to basically log into the APIC EM. So I'm just I'll return once the installation is complete. Once the APIC EM installation is complete, this is what is presented in the screen. All you need to do is basically use the URL that's presented there. It's an HTTPS URL. So we'll just quickly do that. So HTTPS. That's it. You are presented with an APIC EM, and you can actually start demonstrating either applications on the APIC EM. This concludes the APIC EM installation video. Do watch out for other videos that I'll post soon. Thank you.